Dr. John Hagelin is a renowned quantum physicist, educator, author, public policy expert, and president of the David Lynch Foundation for Consciousness-Based Education and World Peace. Dr. Hagelin has conducted pioneering research at CERN, which is the European Center for Particle Physics. The reason why Dr. Hagelin is here is because he has also led, for the last 25 years, one of the most significant scientific investigations into the foundations of human consciousness, into looking at these understandings that have come with us throughout time of meditation, of a field of bliss consciousness or pure consciousness within, and how we can access that and create a more peaceful world. Would you please welcome Dr. Hagelin?
Thank you very much. He has asked me to come and shed a little bit of scientific perspective on what this experience of unity is, experience of inner peace is. It's just a technique to turn human awareness powerfully within, to experience deeper levels of the thinking process, deeper levels of mind, corresponding, by the way, to the direct experience of deeper levels of nature. And this inward march, inward exploration of consciousness culminates in the direct experience beyond the source of thought, really at the source of thought, a direct experience of a field of unbounded consciousness, universal awareness.
We can only see between infrared light and ultraviolet light. We can only hear a limited decibel range. We think reality is what we can apportion through the limited instruments of the senses, but reality is, of course, far beyond that.
But to understand that, I think, there's another way to look at the transcending process that perhaps is a little more graphic. In waking consciousness, our awareness, which is normally abstract, limitless, unbounded, gets somehow funneled. It gets narrowly focused onto a particular object of experience. It's either this or something. From the moment the alarm clock goes off in the morning and you realize you're late for class, from that moment on, you're aware of one thing after another, one object, one thought, one emotion, until you collapse to sleep that night. So the awareness in waking consciousness is sharply focused on a particular concrete object of experience. The meditative process is one of retiring or withdrawing that narrowly focused consciousness to begin to relax and expand and comprehend greater wholeness and greater wholenesses and greater wholenesses as the awareness retires from that sharp focus of awareness. So broader comprehension, and then suddenly, surprise, limitless comprehension, unbounded, abstract being. Now, when that happens, not surprisingly, the activity of the brain transforms markedly. Frankly, it's a lot like an orchestra before the conductor takes the stage. And what happens? The musicians are warming up, sawing away at their instruments, no real effort to coordinate their activity, and the result is a cacophony of discordant sound. Then the musician, or the orchestra, the conductor, steps up to the podium and raises the baton, and in an instant, that cacophony of discordant sound is transformed into flowing music. The difference is the integrated functioning of the orchestra, the coordinated, synchronous functioning of the orchestra. That's what happens to the brain in what's now called the meditative state, now considered to be a fourth major state of human consciousness, distinct from waking, dreaming, or sleep. That, as the awareness expands and expands and expands, the whole brain comes into concert.
Our eyes can only see between infrared light and ultraviolet light. There's light bouncing around everywhere. Our ears can only hear a tiny decibel range, can't hear the noise of a dog whistle, can't hear any high-pitched frequency sounds. Isn't it likely then that there are other vibrations, frequencies, energies, consciousness moving through the universe? Like Einstein himself said, when asked if he was religious, well, I believe there are forces in this universe that I will never understand, and I hold these forces in great reverence, and to that degree I am religious.
I believe this is an educational breakthrough of the foremost magnitude. Why? Why such a big deal? Because EEG coherence, orderly brain functioning, correlates with rising IQ, intelligence, increased creativity, improved academic performance and learning ability, short-term and long-term memory, increased psychological stability, emotional maturity, reaction time, moral reasoning, alertness. Everything good about the brain depends on its orderly functioning. And why it's so important, I think, is not just for development of IQ, development of creativity, development of stability, but what's really going on here is something called growth of enlightenment. Enlightenment is often described as self-realization, realization of oneself, the true nature of oneself. And it's not rocket science. It's pretty clear to understand what that is. The self, our innermost self, is our subjectivity, that which experiences, the experiencer, that which sees, that which knows.
I'm interested to know whether that's had a knock-on effect personally for you.
Spiritual practices, thanks for that question. Spiritual practices, as anyone that has a spiritual life of any kind will tell you, it obviously influences, it has a huge impact, so it diminishes the aspect of your life that's materialistic. For me, what meditation's about is recognizing that my individualism, my fear, my desire, what I want, what I'm afraid of, those things are normally temporary and impulsive things. And like through meditation, and to a degree prayer, I connect with a different narrative, a different frequency, you could say, of consciousness. I think that's incredibly valuable.
And the problem with this consciousness, the self, is that it's an experience as basic as it seems that is systematically missed in waking consciousness. Because waking consciousness is all about the experience of the object of perception, not the perceiver, which somehow gets sacrificed. Experience of consciousness gets overshadowed, in effect, by the experience of the concrete object. So self-realization is just the realization through direct experience of the unbounded nature of consciousness. And that's called enlightenment or liberation or self-realization, because until that happens, until you're so familiar with this field of consciousness within that you never forget it, that it's always with you, never lost to the experience of one's unbounded, blissful inner self, even if you're under anesthesia, or in the depths of sleep, or in dreaming, or playing tennis, or taking an exam. Never losing the experience of this unbounded inner consciousness. That is called self-realization or enlightenment. And I'll tell you why it's called liberation or freedom from bondage. Because until that experience is stabilized, not that kind of bondage, until that experience is stabilized, your life is all about what you experience. And if you're having mashed potatoes and gravy, and you like mashed potatoes and gravy, that's not so bad. Because even though that's all there is to life at that moment, even at the expense of one's unbounded cosmic universal self, at least it's mashed potatoes and gravy. If you're having okra or marinated eggplant, life is a disaster. Because that's all there is to life at that moment. That's called bondage. Where not that kind of bondage, where our experience is completely bound. Our sense of reality is completely bound by the object of perception. So enlightenment, which is just the result of regular experience of the true nature of ourselves, enlightenment brings strength of invincibility, a stability of bliss, to the point, frankly, where it doesn't matter so much whether you're eating the okra or the mashed potatoes. It's all a play on this continuum of reality, which is oneself, experienced as eternal, unchanging, in the source of universes. I would like you to spend 5 minutes seeing this, and I'm going to introduce one of the best brain researchers in the country, probably the leading researcher on brain development and meditation, Dr. Fred Travis, who has brought with him, again, a very brave student, who's willing to show us what's happening when he's meditating in front of a group of 1,000 people. Well, take a look at the real-time transformation of the functioning of the brain. And at least to those who are used to seeing the electrical activity of the brain, this transformation is amazing. So please welcome Brett Travis and Shane Zisman.
So now it's time to stop talking, and we'll actually see a live demonstration of brainwaves during transcending. So first I'd like to welcome Shane Zisman. What we'll be seeing is his brain electrical activity in real time here. To do is connect it. It's wonderful. So here we go. This is his brain. This is real time here. You can blink 3 times, Shane. Once, twice, 3 times. Good. This is the front left. This is the front right. Now, Shane's brain isn't really in Technicolor. But rather it just helps us see what's here. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at a single brain cell. We'll start in the front. And now you're looking at what the brain is doing when it's really, really active. You see how fast this is? There's 8 seconds on the screen here. This is called beta activity. This is what the brain is doing when it's processing people looking at you, when it's thinking, when it's evaluating. Let's add another lead. This one would be in the back of the brain. This is the back of the brain. This is the visual system. So this is Shane looking out at 700 people. This is the front of his brain. He's thinking, what are we going to have for dinner once this is done? And the key thing is, notice it's different. What's happening here is different than what's happening here. Here we have a little settling alpha activity. The front area is very, very active. These are the brain has many, many modules, and they are doing different things when the eyes are open. Let's see what happens when you close your eyes. You close your eyes, Shane? You see this come right up here? This is called alpha activity. Let's see if we can get another alpha burst there. Oh, that was good. I stopped it. This type of activity is resting rhythm of the cortex. Thank you, Shane. What we see here is this is what the brain looks like when it's not actively processing information. The back part of your brain is your visual center. What falls on your eye goes to the back part of the brain. So when your eyes are open, you have all this electrical activity streaming back. The brain is working as fast as it can. You close the eyes, that part of the brain can rest. And that's where this was first seen in the back part of the brain, this resting rhythm of the cortex. What happens when you meditate, we see this very much also in the front of the brain, the chief executive officer of the brain. So you can open your eyes, Shane. He wanted to see too. So we'll start with eyes open. Now close your eyes. Now begin transcendental meditation practice. And noticing what's happening. You can see it here. There's the burst here. So here, notice this is 16 seconds. Thank you, Shane. So notice this is 20 seconds into the meditation, and what we have here is in the front, in this frontal executive area, the part of the brain which is judgment, decision-making like that. Notice how high amplitude this is, and most key is noticing how this and this go together. You can see how this wave rising up and down is also seen down here and seen here. This is what coherence is. The actual physical movement of the wave in time is stable. And what this is suggested, is thought to mean, is connectivity. One part of the brain, the other part of the brain are doing the same thing. During TM practice, we'll just have 2 leads here, one in the front, one in the back. During TM practice, we see it over the whole scalp. this idea of restful alertness. The whole brain is now quiet, silent, but highly alert, ready to go. It's like an arrow that's been pulled back on the bow. Great dynamism. Let's just spend a minute or two, and we'll watch some more meditation here. And you notice it's becoming much more dense now that he's been meditating for a few minutes here. This is great, James. So you can stop meditating. Thank you. Now the point, again, to take home is experience changes the brain. I want that deep in your brain. Experience changes the brain. Okay, so now his eyes are open. What we see here is what meditation does is, yes, it's a delightful inner experience, but more fundamentally, what it is it leads to a different style of brain functioning. What it actually does is leads to a whole different character of connections between your brain cells. And by swinging it back and forth from this restful alertness to activity, restful alertness, activity, you can actually bring them together. So you can have quietness, alertness, expansion of vision, bliss, at the same time as going very deep into whatever you're doing. You probably know that in 5 years, 80% of what you're learning is going to be obsolete. And so what's the value of going to school? Well, it has a lot of value. You learn some processes and techniques, good networking. But the most enduring thing you can create in college is that level of brain connectivity, which allows you to think clearly, allows you to plan in the future. So I'd like to leave you with one bit of recommendation. We'll go back to the Wizard of Oz motif to get back to this film idea. This is the end of the Wizard of Oz, and here's the Scarecrow and the Wizard. Remember what the Scarecrow wanted? A brain. The Scarecrow wanted a brain. And remember what he did? He was almost burned to death. The monkeys carried him away, pulling out the stuffing from all over. He did all that because he wanted a brain. He gets to the wizard, and what does the wizard give him? A piece of paper. This is my recommendation to you. Don't be content with just getting a piece of paper from college. Thank you very much.